In a dark, filthy room, a woman is tied to a bed, screaming in pain as she gives birth. After a few minutes of unbearable agony, a deformed baby is born. A man wearing a mask checks the child, then coldly kills the mother without saying a word. Everything had begun 2 years earlier, when a group of soldiers were sent to deliver supplies to a secret military zone known as Sector 16. The area was restricted, and the soldiers had no idea what kind of experiments were being done there. As they drove through the barren desert, one of them remembered that the army had once tested nuclear weapons in this place. The team worried it might still be radioactive, but their leader, Jeffrey, assured them that their superiors had confirmed it was safe. When they reached the scientist's base, they found it completely empty. Then suddenly, a weak voice came through the truck radio. A man begged for help, saying he was trapped somewhere up the hill, and moments later the soldiers spotted a flashing light from the top of the hill. Believing someone might be alive, Jeffrey ordered the team to go on a rescue mission. Napoleon, one of the soldiers, thought it was a bad idea to leave before contacting the base, but Jeffrey mocked him and punished him by making him guard the bathroom while standing on one leg. Jeffrey ordered Amber to stay behind too, and told her to keep trying the radio. The rest of the team began climbing the hill. As they moved, Mickey accidentally stepped on a hidden pit and fell into it. The others rushed to pull him out just in time, and when they threw a rock inside, they realized it was incredibly deep, probably around 100 meters. Back at the camp, Napoleon entered the toilet to relieve himself, when suddenly he heard strange noises coming from below. Then a hand reached out of the toilet and grabbed his leg. Screaming in horror, Napoleon ran out. Amber didn't believe him, so she went to check. But when she looked closer, an entire arm pushed out of the filth. Both soldiers screamed as a man crawled out of the toilet, weakly asking for help. They pulled him out and recognized him as one of the missing scientists. Just before dying, the scientist whispered that they are here. Napoleon examined him and realized someone had sliced his body in a way that would cause a slow, painful infection. After cleaning up, Amber and Napoleon tried to contact Jeffrey again, but the radio still didn't work. Then they noticed smoke rising nearby and realized someone had set their truck on fire. Amber decided to look for Jeffrey and the others to warn them, but Napoleon chose to stay behind. Not long after, Amber heard something moving behind her. Suddenly, a zombie jumped at her and tackled her to the ground. Just as she was about to lose the fight, a bullet hit the mutant. It was Mickey, who had come back and fired from behind a pile of rocks. The zombie screamed and escaped by jumping into one of the deep mine holes. Amber ran to thank Mickey, but suddenly, another hand reached out from a nearby hole and grabbed Mickey's leg. Amber tried to pull him up, but the grip was too strong. Napoleon arrived to help, but it was too late. Mickey screamed as his leg snapped and his body was crushed and pulled down into the darkness. Meanwhile, Jeffrey's team continued their climb, hearing strange noises echoing through the rocks. Suddenly, a mutant attacked Spitter, slashing his backpack. Spitter fired wildly and accidentally hit Jeffrey multiple times. Jeffrey collapsed and died instantly as the mutant disappeared. Amber and Napoleon arrived shortly after and told the others about Mickey's death. The soldiers wrapped Jeffrey's body in a blanket and began carrying him back. When they tried to climb down, Spitter went first with Jeffrey's body. Everything was fine at first, but then the rope suddenly snapped and Spitter fell and died instantly. Crank blamed Napoleon for tying the rope badly, but Delma checked it and discovered the rope had been cut. The soldiers tried to find another path, but all they found were dead ends. Then they heard a noise and discovered another scientist lying on the ground and barely alive. With a wild look in his eyes, he told them that the survivors of the old nuclear experiments had mutated over time and now lived underground. These mutants killed every man they found but kept women alive to reproduce. The soldiers realized too late that Sector 16 wasn't a research base, but a breeding ground for radioactive monsters. Minutes later, Missy sat beside Amber and showed her a video of her son. Suddenly, a zombie appeared behind them and Missy shouted now because it was a trap. The men immediately opened fire and killed the mutant. After things calmed down, Missy went behind a rock to relieve herself, not realizing another zombie was hiding there. He grabbed Missy from behind and her screams alerted the others. They ran down a path and saw the creature dragging her into the mines. Without hesitation, the group chased after it and entered the dark tunnels. Stump hesitated and decided to climb back out and bring reinforcements, promising to return with help. The others kept searching for Missy, unaware that glowing eyes were watching them from the shadows. Eventually, they reached a dead end and found Missy's phone on the ground. Delma slid down through a narrow opening, kicking away rocks until he broke through to a lower level. Once he confirmed it was safe, the others followed. Meanwhile, Stump was climbing down the rocky hillside alone. He began to hear faint noises echoing around him. Then rocks started falling. His nerves shook, but he kept going carefully, without using a rope. Halfway down, he spotted a tunnel opening in the cliff wall and called out to his team, but there was no answer. As he turned to leave, a mutant suddenly crawled out of the darkness, slashed his hand, and sent him falling to his death. Back inside the mine, the team reached a tunnel filled with murky water, forcing them to move slowly since they couldn't see the ground. Amber quietly slipped a bullet into her pocket, saving it in case she needed to end her own life. Then, the ground gave way beneath her, and she fell through a pit, and when Napoleon tried to grab her, he fell too. The water drained into the hole, leaving Crank and Delma above. Seeing that the others were alive, they decided to split into two groups and keep searching. Below, the mutant carrying Missy lurked in the shadows, watching but not attacking yet. Delma and Crank reached another gap in the floor. Crank tried to leap across but barely held onto the edge. As he started slipping, Delma jumped after him, made it across, and helped pull him up. They used an old beam to climb down safely into another chamber filled with dust and debris. Meanwhile, Missy was thrown to the floor by the mutant who had taken her. She spat in his face in disgust. The creature slapped her hard and sneered before throwing her onto a filthy bed. He leaned over her, then forced his tongue into her mouth. Missy kicked him between the legs and tried to run, but before she could escape, a giant mutant appeared in the doorway. The smaller mutant whimpered and called him Papa, but the giant hit him across the face, making him flee in fear. The giant mutant turned back to Missy and growled that he wanted a baby. He then began to assault her violently as her screams echoed through the mine. Hearing her cries, Delma and Crank tried to follow the sound. Meanwhile, a mutant attacked Napoleon from behind. The mutant lunged, but Amber forced her fingers into its eye. The monster grabbed her throat and began choking her, but Napoleon grabbed a rock and smashed its skull repeatedly until it collapsed dead. Just then, a blind mutant entered the tunnel, sniffing for them. Amber and Napoleon quietly backed away and fell through a hidden hatch. To their shock, a half-human mutant closed it and told them they were safe. Not far away, Crank and Delma reached the same tunnel. Their voices alerted the blind mutant, who began firing a gun wildly. Delma was hit, but Crank retaliated, emptying his weapon until the mutant fell dead. Napoleon lifted the hatch and helped them down to safety. The friendly mutant guided them through a secret passage to a horrible room filled with human remains, body parts on tables, hanging from hooks, stuffed into fridges and grinders. Delma collapsed and died in Crank's arms, and the remaining survivors carried his body as they moved toward the exit. Sadly, the door was jammed shut. Amber wanted to turn back for Missy, but Crank insisted she was already dead. Then he noticed boxes of dynamite behind a wooden door. Ignoring the mutant's warning not to touch it, he ripped off the planks. Crank grabbed a box of dynamite, but accidentally pulled a live wire. The explosion shook the entire mine, while Amber and Napoleon were thrown to the ground by falling debris. When they recovered, they found Crank's mangled body. At the same time, the giant mutant was tying Missy to the bed again, as her terrified screams echoed through the collapsing tunnels. Following the noise, Amber and Napoleon entered a new passage blown open by the explosion. They continued through the wreckage and saw the giant mutant through a gap in the wooden wall. Amber placed Missy's phone in another room and played a video to distract the creature. When he went to investigate, they rushed in and freed Missy, but the mutant returned, crashing through the wooden wall. He threw Napoleon to the ground and grabbed Missy, slamming her repeatedly against the floor. Amber fired her single-save bullet into his head. It tore away part of his skull but didn't kill him. The mutant knocked Napoleon aside again and wrapped his hands around Amber's throat. Napoleon seized a metal rod and stabbed the monster through the neck, holding him in place while Amber jammed her fingers into his exposed brain, crushing it until he collapsed. As they caught their breath, Missy, enraged and trembling, kicked the corpse repeatedly, but the monster suddenly grabbed her ankle. He reached for a knife, but Napoleon swung an axe, splitting his hand. Amber helped Missy up, and together they finished him off. Missy smashed his groin with a hammer, and Napoleon shoved his gun into the creature's mouth and fired, ending it for good. The 3 survivors finally made it out of the mine, but the soldiers who went missing were later reported as absent without leave, and Sector 16 remained a secret forever.